Hey Anne, welcome to episode 2. How are you doing today?
Great. It's a rainy day here in Kale, but looking forward to having a good chat with you, Hannah. As always, let's discuss Industry 4.0's digital vortex.
You keep on coming up with new titles, it seems. But right.
Well, yeah, if I keep saying the same thing, it's boring. So say the same thing with slightly different words. Yes.
Oh no, I don't think so. As Nike would keep changing it. I think Nike's one is just do it, is it?
Yeah, I can see how much sport you do, Hannah.
No, I don't know. I have no idea.
Just do it sometimes, maybe if you feel like it.
Okay. Right. So I had this question in mind. Yesterday I was talking to a few people and very interestingly, one of them was saying that AI will not be that much relevant. You still need humans. So I mean, of course, there's merit to that, but so that's one point. Second point was another person was saying, oh, there's no future to blockchain. And the third point was someone was saying that EV is going to die soon. Not many people will buy EVs, and so in my mind, when those conversations were happening, I kept thinking that because I am a leaderpreneur, I sort of believe in building a better world and using my disruptor radar to know what's coming ahead and how to prepare myself for it. So what do you have to say on that? On being a leaderpreneur in a world where people are still a bit skeptic about Industry 4.0?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question, right? And I think sort of the way to navigate infinity is with humility. So you basically, everyone has an opinion, but realistically, everyone's opinion about the future, and I will include myself in that, is most likely wrong, right? There are very few people 100 years ago who would have predicted what we have today, right? Maybe even 50 years ago, maybe even 30 years ago, right? And certainly if you go into different parts of the world, right? If you were, let's say, into some areas in China, India, Africa, right, which could be considered less developed, um, even 20 years ago, what they are now experiencing would be considered miraculous. It's also very difficult to imagine the world as it might be when you're so familiar with something as it is. So trying to imagine a world without ICE and internal combustion engines, EVs, replacing them, imagining a world with AI, it's never happened before. So you won't have the ability necessarily to envision that. Most people just don't have that skill. It's a skill, right? So I think one has to be very careful about listening to others. Everyone has an opinion, but not all opinions are equal. And so someone like myself has spent a long time and has a lot of breadth and depth of experience about being familiar with technologies, the rate of change of technology, how it's affecting human society. And so that gives, I think, my opinion probably a bit more credibility and weight than some others. But then equally, that doesn't mean that I'm right. It just means it's more about talking about direction and trends and rates of change, and you can extrapolate from that. But what we can see in, for example, the rate of the internal combustion engine being replaced by electric cars is that the revolution is very much underway. It's already done, I think, is in the sense of if you're looking at the exponential rates of growth. So in Europe, for example, electric car vehicles are now at 20 to 30% of sales. And so as we know from the disruptor playbook, right, that when you're doubling every year, it only takes 7, 8 years for the market. By 2030, the European market will only be EV, right? The only cars that will have combustion engines will be classic cars like my dad has, or those sort of unique pieces. There will not be any non-combustion engine cars in Europe, and if you're driving one, you'll be looked at as either a loser or a maniac who's destroying the climate, because
Let
that's what
me
also drives the shift is the change in what's cool and what's normal.
Let me sort of cut you here to ask what is the disruptor playbook? Because you're using a term that I think not many people know about it.
It's sort of the way in which the existing status quo is dramatically transformed, right? And so what will happen is typically a startup will develop a brand new piece of technology, then they'll be in stealth mode, then they will have a surprising launch, right? So we can look at someone like Tesla, right, with the Model S. The Model S in America, I'm not sure what the current rate is, but certainly for a reasonable amount of time in the last 10 years, outsold Mercedes, BMW, and Audi combined for its category, right? So they're in stealth mode. They're building this electric car, which in the 90s and noughts, right, were pretty crappy cars. Um, and then suddenly so you have stealth mode where you develop something, surprise where you surprise the market, and then you have speed in which you rapidly upgrade your vehicle and what's available. So Tesla developed the Model Y, they developed the Model X, and they developed the Model 3. And if you want an interesting bit of trivia, what they were trying to do was spell the letters sexy. But unfortunately, Ford ruined that for them by registering a car under the name of E. And so that's why Tesla is Model 3. But if you look at the letters, it's S, X, and Y.
Oh, wow, I didn't know that.
Good bit of banter there. And then the fourth component of the disruptor playbook is scale. So you don't scale first, you speed first. You rapidly upgrade and improve, and then you scale into different markets with your upgraded proposition. So they're scaling up the existing portfolio that Tesla has. They're not necessarily, they are working on the Cybertruck and the long haul truck and other things like that, but those are talked about. They're not in full production yet, right? And that's because they're in the scale mode of reaching as many markets as they can with their current offering. And then number 5 is sustain, which is embed the platform, and that's things like the supercharger network and things like that, where you embed yourself into the way of working. And if you have a look at, for example, Toyota does, even though it did pioneering work with Prius EVs, not EVs, Prius hybrids, they don't have a credible electric vehicle. So if you think about, for example, in Europe, one European market where 30% of new car sales are all electric, that means that not a single Toyota is being sold there, right? Not a single one. And Toyota is the largest car manufacturer in the world. So and if we're saying that in Europe within the next few years we'll not sell any more combustion engines, that means literally no one is buying a Toyota anymore, right? And not only they're not buying a Toyota, they're not buying the aftercare, because a lot of the car business model is not just selling the car, it's the repairs afterwards, it's the servicing, it's the insurance, it's the loans, it's the whole shebang. There's a massive industry around this stuff. And so that's why it's so disruptive, because you're so used to the status quo and you're so convinced it's going to keep existing. And in a similar way to what we all experience with it, believing that Nokia will continue to rule the world, or BlackBerry, right? It was impossible to imagine otherwise. And then when it happened, it was always obvious. That being said, I think, when we talk about these things like blockchain and AI, again, the average person is not exposed to the rate at which technology is happening and developing at the moment. And we are not either. I wouldn't consider myself to be particularly privileged in that sense. It's just, I'm better at being able to step back and realize how little I know. And the extraordinary rate, I mean, the ChatGPT reached 100 million users in a month, right? From 0 to 100 million users in a month. That's an extraordinary growth rate. So whether it's ChatGPT or other players who take over, that it's already there. And this is going to become the new normal. And in many ways, I was reflecting on this the other day, it already is. A lot of people already work for an AI, right? Every Uber and Grab driver is working for an AI. And they love it. It's great. You can turn it off, right? You get paid fairly. There's no politics. There's no bullshit. By and large, it works. So it's already coming into life, and people don't see that. And I think that's what kind of makes it difficult for them to think about the future. But your question was about materializing the future, right? Reifying it into reality, bringing it forth. How do you care about building a better world? And I think that's really an question.
Because
Let's
we are
explore that.
leadapreneur. Yeah, because by definition, a leadapreneur is a digital autonomous innovator. Is it? Am I saying the right definition? Right.
Yes.
And we have this mindset, which we label it as a Genesis mindset. And when I say that, when in a room full of other people, you can see that difference of someone who's a leaderpreneur coming up with that hope that you can build your better world by yourself, and someone who is sort of a skeptic. So I wanted you to explore more on that today.
Yeah, exactly. And interesting that you say the word hope there, because I kind of very much agree with the ancient Greeks who put hope in Pandora's box. Because hope, as we know it today, is particularly in Christian theology, is where it has its positive spin, right? We hope that we will be saved or things will happen, right? Hope, thoughts and prayers kind of thing, right? I hope you're going to be okay. Whereas the ancient Greeks saw it much more as, well, it can be a double-edged sword, right? On the one hand, you have the positive power of hope, but on the other hand, you have its delusional capability. Hoping for a better world will not bring about a better world, right? And then the idea behind the Leadapreneur is the realization, for me, it was a very powerful realization when I was much younger, of the world does not exist, it must be built, and someone has to build it. And so if you don't have people who build a better world, it literally just will not be built. And that's it. And so the ability to live in a better world is fundamentally a function of how many people there are who are building our better worlds and how good they are at building them. And I think what happens, especially in the West, is we have just come complacent building on the hard work of those generations who came before us, and we just assume the better world. Whereas if you look at Asia, less so now, but certainly in the last 2, 3, 4, 5 decades, particularly, the rate of growth was driven by very hardworking individuals, like the China miracle, right? The Singapore miracle, the tiger economies of ASEAN, right? Maybe even now India rising, right? These are powerful narratives of people, of world builders, right? Very hardworking people looking to do that. And so that's a quality that I think we want to achieve as leadapreneurs, take that to the next level, that you're not just building a better life for your family, but you're building a better world for what you care about. And so that's why a leadapreneur, empowered by the Genesis mindsets, they create, they build it. They're not hoping, they're not waiting, they're not, seeking approval from someone. They're autonomous, right? In that definition, the autonomous digital innovator is one who decides for themselves what must be done. But equally, I'm not advocating for a brash, move fast and break things a la Zuckerberg, though that can be useful times if it's necessary, right? But really the world exists as a collaborative endeavor. It's because we build it as a socio-matrix. We agree to come together around what we think is good. And that's really what brings the world. And so when we want to build a better world, we have to be in dialogue with each other about what that actually looks like. A lot of the challenge of building a better world is the ethical conversation behind it. I might think that what my idea is really cool, but it might negatively affect you, right? And so it's about being able to operate at many levels. It's not just the idea, right? And that's why the leaderpreneur has those 5 skill sets, right? You have the entrepreneurial skill. That's obviously important for creativity and being able to innovate and imagine that better world. But then you also need to have the leadership skill, which is to inspire people to actually go out there and build it with you. Right? You can't force them. You have to inspire them to follow you and listen to you and to adapt to change because of you, because of your vision, not your bosses, not someone else's, but you have to be that leadership phenomena, that energy. And then, of course, you have the management skills, which is why a leaderpreneur has an A inside of it, because it references the fact that we shouldn't forget that management is a very powerful skill of actually getting it to be good. Just because you're a really inspiring leader who creates lots of cool ideas doesn't mean that you're going to, it works well and that it'll be, for example, profitable and healthy and successful. Management is crucial as a skill for being able to do that. And then the last 2 skills are really the sort of the force multipliers, because from a communication aspect, the communication skill is essential. You have to be able to tell the story about why we are building this better world. You have to be able to listen to others, which is half of the communication skill, right? And so it's not just the leaderpreneur on their own with those 3 skills of leadership, management, and entrepreneurship. It's about being part of a networked environment, an ecology of innovation, an ecosystem of innovation, where you're using your communication skills to dialogue with the others and listen and receive and transmit effectively. And then finally, it's the collaboration skill, which means, yes, you want to build your better world, but so do others want to build their better worlds too, because it's not better world singular, it's better world plural, because there are many different worlds on Earth today. And so if I want to build my better world, then, and you want to build your better world, well, it's better if we collaborate together and help each other where we can. And so that's why I think that kind of the leaderpreneur really presents a very different kind of proposition as an identity and as a capability.
That's so well said, Jan. And I also want to ask, how do you differentiate someone who is building their better world and that of a CSR initiative or a white ocean strategy being implemented? Because sometimes people think that, for you to build your better world, you have to be doing some good things like plant trees, save plastic bottles from the ocean, and also how do you sort of differentiate between those two?
That's a great question. What was it you said? Corporate CSR, and what was the other one?
White ocean. So when you have a business and then part of your business, part of your profit goes into charity or into helping a good cause.
Right. Okay. So yeah, I mean, I think CSR initiatives are sort of the birthing point inside the organization of a higher sense of consciousness, because the problem is that with the language of management, it's self-referential and therefore self-successful. Management extracts from the world and just sees it as a given. You're managing the already existing world, so it doesn't matter if you're degrading it. It doesn't matter it's not your problem, right? You're pumping out environment. You're basically treating people badly. What matters is maximizing shareholder value, right? And or often what then happens is management captures the organization. It's about improving manager value, right, and profit. So I think CSR initiatives are sort of an important place in which that call of consciousness starts inside the organization to say, hey, shouldn't we be doing something better here? Isn't there a way in which we could actually be making more positive impact inside the environments in which we operate in? So I think that's a very important place to start that conversation, because it's a very absent conversation. And we can see that today in all the scandals and things that we've seen inside organizations and their impact on the world, right? Whether it's through pollution or through participation in criminal activities, right? So, for example, like 1MDB and Goldman Sachs, right, is another way of could be seen as a governance failure, right? So, but what really ends up happening, Hannah, which is so interesting and I think so powerful, is that whereas management typically would dismiss CSR initiatives as just a little like greenwashing, right? Oh yeah, we'll just make a nice little report. What is misunderstood is without those kind of initiatives, management just races to the bottom of consciousness in its blind pursuit of efficiency, and therefore ends up destroying the organization. And that's why people become disengaged, people stop caring, they leave, and those organizations are destined to fail. The organization that doesn't care will fail, it will die. And it's just a question of how quickly. And in the accelerated environment of Industry 4.0, the answer is quickly. It will die quickly. And so as a result, I think, and this is really sort of what's prompted a lot of the growth of ESG investment, right? Environment, social, and governance investing, which, yes, can be accused of greenwashing, but certainly it's moving things in the right direction. And ultimately what the realization is, basically, if you care about the environment and about treating people well, the social and good governance, you're operating transparently and with good abidance to the laws, you're going to have a better company. And as an investor, your risk profile is lower. If you're investing in companies that have no ESG, you're at greater risk of losing your money or being exposed to scandal and all these kinds of things. Whereas if you're investing in companies that are ESG compliant and good at it and actually practice it, then your chances of investing in a good company are statistically higher, and often actually quite significantly higher, especially over the longer term. So that's really what's prompting this shift. And that comes down to either you get this or you don't get this, right? Either you do get this or you don't get this. And so, investing in ESG is a way, yes, to do good, but ultimately it's about understanding that the nature of good is not just to help people and put that in your brochure. It's about building a better company for yourself and building a better working environment for yourself too, because what often happens is the environment which you're operating in affects your own sense of consciousness. So if you're in an organization where it's incredibly polluting and toxic, if you're in an environment where it doesn't treat people well and abuses people from the social sense and is very poorly governed, is corrupt and is full of malpractice, that's not a good place for a human to be, right? It's going to affect you. You're going to pay the price for that. And I think what we're seeing today is more and more people are choosing not to work in those environments and preferring to work in ESG positive environments. So it's kind of, it's very deceptive when people think build your better world. They're like, what most people have not had a chance to really immerse themselves in is just how difficult it is to define what a better world actually looks like and to actually pursue that. And why would you want to do that? Well, you don't have to, but I've always found this a very puzzling question. Like, why wouldn't you try and build a better world? What do you want to do? Build an averager world? Build a worse world? Like, yes, it's ambitious. And yeah, I'm not saying you have to succeed every day, but as a general direction in your life trajectory, wouldn't you want to look back and say, I played my part in trying to help build a better world? Right? I think that's a very, very fundamental aspect that you choose to do as an individual. And it's important for your soul and your spirit and your consciousness, because that will affect you. And it's going to affect the way you participate with your loved ones, your family, your children, your grandchildren, and everything else that flows from that. And at first one might say, oh, well, I've just got to survive through the day. And okay, fair enough. But once you're at a certain level of success and you're not in the immediate survival environment, right, then you have an opportunity to consider those things. And actually what ends up happening is as you work with those, you engage in the journey of elevating your own consciousness and therefore expand yourself. So I think what we're going to end up seeing is the realization that what does good mean is something that we're going to gather around and have different points of view around. And we're going to work with organizations that are doing the good that we believe is important to be done, as opposed to working with organizations just to make a bit more money. And that's just sort of going to be this massive transition as we move into Industry 4.0, away from this consumer society that dominates Industry 3.0, right? Because Industry 3.0, and especially with modernism and postmodernism, basically says the purpose of your life is to buy a car. And let's say you start with a Fiat, and maybe if you're lucky, you end up with a Ferrari. And that's it. That is literally it. That's your journey, and that's all there is. And doesn't matter the environmental consequences and the fact that the sea levels may be rising, we're polluting the environment and we're asphyxiating in the gases of those cars that we're driving. But that's not sustainable. And it's just wise to recognize that that's not sustainable. It's not, I don't think that's a theoretical point of view. It's just a blunt fact. It's not sustainable. And not only is it not sustainable, there's also an opportunity to build something better. One of the great achievements of the EV revolution will be clean air inside of cities, or much cleaner air, right? If you have a look at what the UN Statistics Agency describe in the largest cities in the world, and by this, I'm not just talking about the obvious ones like maybe some Indian or Chinese cities, but Paris, London, New York. London suffers from critical issues of nitrogen, I think it's oxide or dioxide, which is extremely poisonous. It's estimated that there are hundreds of thousands of excess deaths in Europe alone from breathing in all these fumes, cancerous fumes. And, you know, imagine if you took a car, Hannah, and put it inside your room right now and you turned on the engine. You'd probably feel a little uncomfortable with that, right? Except that's actually what we're doing. And that is just called Kuala Lumpur, the room. And you can see that when you get on a plane and you fly up and you see that fog, yes, right? That smoke. And you're like, am I actually living in that? Oh my gosh, right? But yeah, you are.
I always
right?
thought it's cloud. Aren't they cloud?
Pardon?
Isn't that cloud? I always thought that's cloud.
Well, there's the clouds in the sky that are formed from moisture, right? But if you look at the city, you see that brownish haze. That's just all the emissions. And that's what we're all living and breathing in every single day. And that it's not good for you. It's poisoning you, whatever people may say. And that's a lot of what the Volkswagen Dieselgate.
Come to the lie, baby. The sky
yeah, I
is
mean,
clear.
Yeah,
So I got one more plus point.
Yeah, you can see it near where I live here. You can see where the trees are black because of the emissions, right? And if you stand on the other side, facing the road, and you stand on the other side of the tree, it's not, right? So, you know, future generations in 50 to 100 years' time will look back and just like, what were they guys doing? You know, for like 120 years, these nutters were burning combustion engines and breathing it in every day, you know, forcing their children to do that. And, you know, how can you, again, I'm not saying that it's easy, but at a basic level, as a human, are you willing to just say, yeah, that's just how it has to be, and we have to keep poisoning ourselves? Like, I'm not even going for the climate conversation, right? I'm not even going for that. I'm just saying from a human decency and quality of life perspective, because that's also what's so important about being a leaderpreneur, the Genesis mindset. So many people just say, well, that's just the way it is. It's not practical. And well, you're right. It is that way. But it was only that way because it became that way. You know, that's not the nature of reality itself, right? It just became that way because humans did it, and we can change that. And from an individualistic point of view, and to be a person who can change that is to be a leaderpreneur. And then when you network leaderpreneurs together into a giant solution engine, then I think we can achieve really powerful things. And that's really why the vision of Leadapreneur is to reach 1% of humanity. If you have 80 million network leaderpreneurs with strong leadership, management, entrepreneurship, communication, and collaboration skills with the Genesis mindset, then you can really start to do amazing things, I think. And so let's go for that. And, you know, it's going to be a fun journey to achieve it no matter what. And we might even do some, and I think we will do a lot of good along the way.
But just now you said something that triggered a memory in me. It was, that's just the way it is. So again, from a conversation that happened recently, someone was saying that they have their business hour, which is 9 to 5, and they still have to be aware, alert for 7 days a week. I'm like, so do you mean that you have to work on a Sunday and Saturday, like constantly 7 days a week? And the person was like, yeah, it just, that's how it is, just the way it is. And I was so shocked that he is agreeing with the fact that as a human being, he has to let go of his free time and just devote about 24/7 of his time to the company. And so that's just one case. And another one was it was around 8 or 9 p.m. and someone was going to the office now to do some work. I'm like, now? And they're like, yeah, but that's the way it is. And again, I was so shocked to believe that I was so shocked that they believe that that's the way it is, because as a leaderpreneur, we believe that you, as again, I'm repeating it myself, but you can build your better world. You can go out there and do something different. And so my question, my last question to you of this conversation is, what if someone is not seeing this? What if someone is not seeing that they can sort of break the barrier, achieve that mindset? Or what if someone has achieved the mindset, but still they can't have that strength, that inner strength to go out there and do something different? What do you have to say to those people?
Well, there is also always the important demands of the present moment, right? So you have to meet those moments. And then the question is, what do you do next? Do you want to keep living your life of always just surviving on a day-to-day basis? Right? So if that's what you feel you need to do, then that's what you need to do. Right? But on the presumption that that this person is a human, humans can learn, humans can improve themselves. And one day you will ask yourself, could this be better? Could I make this better? And maybe not just better for myself, but for the people that I care about, right? My colleagues, my customers, my community, my children, whatever it might be, right? Is it really good for my children that I'm leaving for the office at 8 p.m. when we're just about to sit down for dinner, right? Is it good for me? Is it good for my mental health that I'm doing this? And you can then say it is what it is, and that's it's not correct. That's just your choice to answer it in that way. And that's, I think, where I would be firm about that. You are choosing that. I'm not saying it's easy. Forget the word easy or hard. Life is hard, the end, right? It's just you are choosing that path for yourself. And the more you become an adult, the more you are really choosing that path, right? And so it's about deciding for yourself what reality you want to live in and whether you'd like to change that. And what I think we often do is we disempower ourselves. Now, I'm not saying go out there and create a revolution. I'm just saying start building your better world in the way that you think is right for you. And the way in which you're going to do that is you're going to need to acquire those 5 skills. If you don't have those 5 skills, and that's, I think, where the key act of disablement occurs, because people don't have that skills or they don't necessarily know how to develop them, right? And I often hear, I can't be a leader and things like that. And that's because people misunderstand what these skills are really about. Saying you're not a leader is like saying you're not a professional cook. Well, obviously you're not a professional cook, right? Nor am I, but I just cooked my lunch. It was pretty good. So mushrooms, bok choy, tomatoes. It was very yummy. Is it
Oh yeah,
something that
you
I
do
would?
make a nice bok choy.
Yeah,
Okay, let's
I do.
continue the conversation.
Right?
Yeah.
And I was thinking maybe I should just open up a restaurant and be like, Jan's awesome bok choy.
And potatoes. I think that's the only 2 menu you can make.
Oh yeah, roast potatoes, yeah. So what I think is important is to re-understand around these skills is that they are skills that can be learned. You don't have to be the world's best leader in the same way you don't have to be the world's best cook or the world's best entrepreneur or manager, right? You just have to be competent at these skills to achieve the goals you wish to achieve. And so in the same way that in cooking, you can establish sort of a minimum level of competence, right? You know how to make an omelette, right? You can chop up some vegetables and throw them in the pan. Maybe you can fry a chicken, right? These things aren't too hard. Or, looking at reading and writing, right? You don't have to learn how to write a book to be able to write. You don't have to learn, all these. You can just have a basic level of competence. And I think what the Leadapreneur standard really establishes is a minimum standard of competence around these skills and invites people to develop them. And when you have those skills, you will then naturally be willing and able. When you have those skills and you're empowered with the Genesis mindset, right? Because the skill set is really sort of your capability. So your skill set is your ability to influence the world around you, right? But your will set in a way, right? Your mindset is about your desire to do so. Just because you're skilled doesn't mean you're desirous. And actually, if you ask me what's more important, it's more important to be desirous than it is to be skilled. Because if you desire something, you'll figure it out. But if you don't desire it, you won't. So activating that leaderpreneur, that Genesis mindset, which operates on the principles of believe in yourself, be brave, be bold, be brilliant, build your better world, right? And really manifesting that in a consistent way, that's how you're going to empower yourself. And that's why I designed it in that way. Those are really, there are 10 things. There's 5 skills and there's 5 beliefs in the Genesis mindset that will, if you combine those 10 things, will naturally activate someone to be a world builder. Yeah. And I've seen this. I've seen this across all cultures and ages, and that's one of the reasons why I came to ASEAN, is because here is a wonderful opportunity to try to build this in a democratic way. That whatever background you are, whatever culture you're from, age you are, whatever you identify as, you can do these things. Now, of course, in the end, the final thing I'd say, it's not easy, but then life is not easy. So it's up to you to decide how much you want to empower yourself to live your life and build your better world, or do you want to be stuck accepting whatever's given to you and living in someone else's world? That's up to you.
Well, that's a good reflection point to end on. So thank you so much, Jan. And I think for the first time, we sort of ended on time, 30 minutes on the time. So yeah, it's been a wonderful chat, really. And I do hope people listening out there could take something from this conversation, go out there and build your better world, or reach out to us to learn how to be a leadapreneur. And yep, that's it. That's the end of this episode. Thank you so much for listening to us. And thank you, Jan, for your time.
Thanks, Hannah. Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the Leadapreneurs YouTube channel to get your weekly updates.